Hello, welcome again to another session of Devlogs. So for today's session, I wanted to talk about Mac OS Swift UI development. I wasn't sure, or maybe just app development from a web developer's point of view. So I am a full stack principal engineer. I've been mostly working with web applications, and so this has been my first time developing a Mac application. And I'm a complete newbie, and I wanted to share my thoughts on initial point of view from creating a Mac OS application from scratch. So yeah, I guess let me run the application first, and I'll show you where I got up to, and overall, how hard was it to build this app. So it's very straightforward. So I built this application called Streamer Buddy. So essentially, I wanted to create a collection of tools for my everyday development on, I guess, like content creation or creating streams. Like if you watch the other videos, you would see that I've been getting into video editing, YouTube, uploading videos, and well, you're already watching this video, so you can see why I'm curious. Like, what are the tools that I can make, or what are the things that I can automate, or make things that are connected in the entire space of video editing. And there are, if you watch the previous video as well, there is a script that I do where I can automate video editing, and I'm curious, like, can I start managing those automation bots in a Mac OS, essentially, a Mac OS application? The reason why is I'm always using the terminal, executing commands, and I want to have like a command center, so to speak, of my own application where I don't need to go to the terminal and just hit buttons. I think that's the final level of engineering. So I started off really liking GUI. Everything was GUI. Like, GUI is a graphic user interface. Everything is through buttons. And then later on, I created a lot of scripts. Everything is automated by scripts. Vim, terminal, shell. Everything is scripts. And now I'm coming back to GUIs again, that to manage all those scripts, because at some point you start forgetting the scripts that you want, and you wanna start saving time from typing all those commands. So I've been mostly working with web development, and so this is my first time working on a Mac OS application. And even just the code, Swift UI, I haven't tried it. This is my first time, so I apologize in advance if the code is pretty bad. I don't know yet, even just to separate out the structs, the classes, and in hierarchy. I've been playing around. Even just the folder structure, the imports, and all the stuff. So my first impression was it took me not a whole day, but maybe 2 to 3 hours to get this skeleton up and running. And coming from a Java background and also React state management, and I guess like being a polyglot developer, like having multiple languages, it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. And maybe because I'm more experienced in software development, but I can imagine someone who has less, or maybe not less, but not as experienced as myself, who would be thrown off how to build a native applications, because essentially this is a native application, right? It doesn't run in the browser. You have to run it here. And I wanted to say I went in here blind, so I went to Xcode and then new application, and then started to from the beginning. I just created the whole application from scratch. So I'll comment things out, and I'll show you the thought process here. So let's comment this one out. So what stuck most to me is how intuitive it is. Again, maybe because of how my previous development languages I worked on, but private var and state and just declaring, I guess, the members class variables was pretty straightforward. Even the primitive types, I didn't have to think about it. It was all fairly obvious. I just needed to know how it was written. So the syntax was just state. So I know there's a state here. It's a private variable, username string, empty string. When I created this empty content view, I know that it's expecting a view of some sort. So this is a superclass that should return some view, like a subclass of a view. So I can I already got a sense of what it was looking for, and so this was out of the box. Or maybe I'll create a new project from scratch. Maybe it'll be much easier to follow. So I'll remove this one, and I'll go through how I went about it. So I'll stop task. Let me go with create a new project. So you're shown this template, like you select what type of application you want to create. So I want to create a Mac OS application here, and then I do demo from Melchor. So Swift UI. I'll put it in the desktop. Okay, there you go. So this is from scratch. It already comes in, as I was saying, like the view was already obvious. You know, it's expecting a view, and then there's a VStack. So VStack by default is a vertical stack of how it would display. So essentially, this return, it's chaining. Like a lot of the functions here are chained essentially, and it's very intuitive to read. Coming from Swift UI, I already understood like the vertical stack is returning a view. So I'm assuming there's also a horizontal stack, or so different grid layouts. So the reason why I know this is I used to work in Javax Swing, so Java with an X Swing, and it's when you design a layout, there's a superclass of views that you're able to spin around. I guess like how it would look like. And you can already intuitively sense like the image is the globe here, and then there's a text of hello world. So I started off removing the hello world here and just changing it to say hello, and it worked immediately. I love how there's a instant preview here, and I guess like styling is also passed, like chained around. So there's a view, and then they call the padding here, and I'm assuming there's a input parameter here when I can assume like I can increase or decrease the padding, and I can just remove the text here. So if so this is how my app would look like. So you can immediately say, for example, I copy paste multiple hellos here. This is how your application would look like. So when I started playing around this Swift UI, I then tried to figure out like how do I actually run this application when it's already been edited. And again, it's very intuitive, coming from say VS Code or JetBrains in web development. I really like how in Swift or Xcode it's obvious, like, and maybe because that's the design principle of Apple, right? Like you don't have to think about the design. Everything has been well thought out by the designers. I think Apple has been always design thinking first. How would the users actually use this? And so I saw this play button, and if I hit it, it would start building it, and this is your application. Instantly, you already have a Mac OS applications. And I wanted to, the reason why I wanted to commend is because, or maybe as a reflection for myself, I've always thought of Mac OS development, app development, as a black box. I always thought of it as something complex that you needed to spend years and years trying to figure out. And this was my 5-minute crash course or 10-minute crash course, and I already was able to figure out how to run an application. So it's just a matter of diving into like the nuances of the applications, and then I started to figure out like what are these things here. The search, I think this is where the errors are. Test plan, so they already built in a unit test or performance test. Okay. What else did I wanted to share? There was a configuration here that wasn't so obvious that I needed to figure out when I let's go back to the other application. So I'll stop this task. So going back to this one, so you already can see like there's an image, text field. So again, pretty straightforward. So I started introducing some variables that were needed for my application. Essentially, this application was for now just sending an API request to OpenAI. So I wanted to have a application that was talking to OpenAI. Like I didn't know yet what I would need AI for, but I knew that was one of the first features. And maybe because essentially in a web application, I've been so used to having API requests to different third-party providers. It's a lot of it has been involved in, say, calling several third-party providers. So for example, when you have authentication, or when you have a shopping cart, there's a lot of, you don't build everything from scratch. There's always an API request somewhere in between. And so, but for me, I wanted to have a OpenAI API request. And so you can see here, and I can already imagine people saying like, this is horrible code. Again, I'm a newbie web development. I wasn't sure yet how to build it up. So I was so excited to get it up and running. There's a simple text field, an image, and a button that it was working what it was supposed to. And so the function was created here. It sends a API request here. And you can already see like it has become, this is why I'm not really sure. It has become very straightforward to code coming from, say, web development and maybe a lot back-end language. The struct is from Golang, and it's fairly intuitive. Like I can see tertiary conditional logic here from I learned this from Groovy as well. So I can see like some parts of different languages that are incorporated here. And so it was fairly straightforward. So if you read the code, you can already see like this is just a fetch response, and I'm using the variable username as the content. I'll rename that, and then it just calls a URL to OpenAI. It sends that request. I haven't figured out how to set the API key in an environment variable. It then gets the response, and then it does some parsing to check what is conditional check. Like if the response has a choices object, then if that choices object has a message, get the first one. If that message has a content, and then finally dispatch main async. So some of them it wasn't straightforward that I needed to Google. So what I learned was that in a URL response, it returns in. So there was still a bit of learning curve here, figuring out setting the response text here, Then this one, I'm not 100% sure yet, but I guess 80% of the code was pretty straightforward coming in from a React on backend language. The others I'm still trying to figure out, but it's fairly intuitive to read. I would say, and just running it and getting it up and running was pretty straightforward. There there was a settings, was it? So there was a rule that prohibited me from making a call from third party providers, like the API call, because of the sandbox rule. I'm just trying to figure out where I okay, yeah, here. I was just trying to look for the rules that you needed to make sure to check when you're making a sandbox application from scratch. So it wasn't obvious why my application wasn't able to call outside permission. So essentially, you go to here, your main application, and then you go signing in capabilities, and essentially Apple created guardrails out of the box that prohibits your application from making network calls, accessing your hardware. So you can see my application can access the camera, audio, USB, printing, Bluetooth, contacts, location, calendar by default, and the network is also isolated. So if you don't know what you're doing, it's good, because then, or essentially, if you're installing, or if you don't trust the code that you're getting, it's good when Apple creates these certain guardrails by default. So it's safe by default. You have to explicitly remove those guardrails in order for you to make those network calls outside incoming and outgoing server and client calls. So I really like how, and maybe because I was a beginner, I didn't know how. I did a lot of, I guess, googling first to figure out how to enable this, but after that, this was all working fine for me. Let me show you the streamer buddy. It's not too exciting for now, so it's just hello. So you can see straight vertical stack. So you can see it's all in the center. So image, text field, button, and then another text. So there's also no icon or image in my application yet. And again, this is all pretty straightforward. So if it just, whatever I type in here, it will just send to ChatGPT and then ask the same question. So I guess developing this application, it saved me 2 to 3 or 4 clicks of going to the browser, going to OpenAI, and then typing my chat there, and then going through. So it's a lot of development from saving a couple of seconds. But again, I'm sure some of the engineers can relate, where you spend hours and hours trying to automate things that you could have done in seconds. But I don't know, and just the act of learning how to build an application was also, it's more thinking about win-win situations, where I automate a couple of things here and there, but also at the same time learn invaluable skills that actually helps you level up. So now I can say I have an idea how Mac OS applications work, and as I progress and build this out, I can add more tools to it, and I'll share the story here as I go. But I'll show you like things that I will find interesting as a web developer principal engineer. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching this devlog where we looked at the XCode as a web engineer. Thank you.